much indeed. Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, Mr. Gove. You have said a few times that deadlines concentrate minds. And I think in normal circumstances, everybody would agree with you on that point. But isn't the key point here, we are not living in normal times? The Chair referred earlier to a statement made by the Director General of the British International Freight Association, where he said, this is not an argument about leaving the EU, that is done and dusted. This is an argument about managing the transition process when not just the goalposts, but the entire playing field has moved. So doesn't the government actually need to take account of the fact that the entire playing field has moved here and to act accordingly and to seek an extension to the transition period?
Well, thank you very much for your question. May I first congratulate you, Stephen, on your promotion back onto the Labour front bench. Congratulations, and richly deserved.
Thank you.
On the broader point, you are right. A lot has changed. Manifestly, a lot has changed. But I'd say several things. The first thing is that some of those, I exempt the groups that you quote. Some of those arguing for an extension now were voices that were arguing for extensions in the past of our negotiations or extensions of the transition period. So there is a constituency that, even though things have changed, haven't changed in their attachment to the principle of remaining under the EU's legal order. Now, I specifically exempt the organisations that you mentioned, but I think it's important to recognise that there are some who take that view. If we were to extend, then it would involve us paying more money into the European Union at a time when that money could be spent on our National Health Service. It would involve us accepting not just the existing EU acquis, but potentially new EU laws over which we would have no say, which could potentially constrain this country. And those EU laws would be shaped in the interests of the EU 27 rather than the UK as well. And also, if we were to accept an extension, then we would find that the incentive to come to an agreement that currently exists on all sides would dissipate. And we would find that, once again, like any missed deadline, the new deadline would stretch for quite some time. And again, a deadline having once been extended, the principle that one side or the other might wish to extend it further and further and further would exist as well. So I do appreciate the vital importance of making sure that we engage with the organisations that you mentioned energetically, but I'm not convinced that extension is the right answer.
Just one point there, though. The treaty that we've signed, the withdrawal agreement, is clear that an extension is possible for 1 or 2 years. You can't extend indefinitely. That would not be within the terms of the treaty. But just to move on to a key point here, which is that a lot of this is not in our control. Of course, there's another key player on the other side of the channel. And we know that the talks between Barnier and Frost have been challenging. We also know that the key decisions in big issues like this are made by prime ministers at the end of the day. Now, the Germans take over the rotating chair of the EU presidency on the 1st of July. Norbert Röttgen, the chair of the Bundestag's Foreign Affairs Committee, has said, to think that you could add to this extraordinary situation a very disorderly exit, to me it is not imaginable. Do you have any evidence at all to suggest that the prime ministers of a continent which has been stricken by the worst crisis that we've seen since the Second World War are going to give any real time or priority to getting this future relationship deal done?
I've met Norbert Röttgen. He's an immensely distinguished and thoughtful figure, so I'm sorry not to agree with him on this occasion. But I think that it's far be it from me to suggest what might be in the EU's interests. EU member states and EU politicians will make those own judgments. But I think it is fair to say that for the EU, there is much that they would wish to do on securing the future of the single currency and on helping their nations, as we wish to see, recover from COVID-19, which would mean that they would have a strong incentive in making sure that our negotiations didn't run into the next year and beyond and occupy bandwidth and political space on their part. I think that there is a strong incentive on the part of other EU member states to see matters concluded. But again, I wouldn't want to speak for them, but I do see where that clear incentive is, and it's reflected in some of the conversations, necessarily private, that we have with politicians within EU member states.
Thanks. How many British civil servants have been redeployed from the future relationship talks to tackle the COVID-19 crisis?
A significant number. I've got the figures here, but I think it's probably fair to say that it's just shy of 100, I think.
So 100 British civil servants have been redeployed to deal with COVID-19 away from the future relationship talks. Don't you think that's having a massive impact on our capacity to complete these talks by the 1st of July?
No, I think that it is the case that those who have been redeployed are people from, there are two particular task forces, Task Force Europe and the Transition Task Force. Their redeployment of some of the very, very best civil servants in the country is appropriate to the challenge that we face. But it is also the case that during the conduct of negotiations last week, that Task Force Europe had its work supplemented by individuals from across Whitehall who were subject specialists in their areas. So Task Force Europe and the Transition Task Force have had some of their top people, as it were, redeployed to COVID-19, but at the same time, the teams have had all the help they need from departmental specialists in areas like fisheries and trade to ensure that their work can continue.
Thank you. Just a final question. A lot of this really is about very difficult choices that government has to make, and we completely understand that. But what do you think is more important, sticking with an arbitrary deadline or taking decisions in the best interest of the health and safety and security of the British people? And don't you see that any disruption, even based on the deal that the government wants to get, a free trade agreement, will involve disruption, potentially disruption to supply chains? And wouldn't it be better to put the health and safety and security of the British people ahead of an arbitrary deadline?
I think that's a very fair challenge, and I agree with you that we should put the health, the safety, the security of the British people, and also the health and safety and security of our friends and partners in the European Union front and centre of all decision making. My belief is that if we can conclude, which I believe we will, an agreement by December, that works in everyone's interests. I respect the fact that there are others of goodwill who differ, but it seems to me that it is a legitimate difference rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you very much.